Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Israeli protesters attack African migrants in Tel Aviv. Amnesty International slams human rights violations in Arab Spring countries. And dozens killed across Syria as new parliament holds first session. Mosaic, world news from the Middle East, begins now.
بنا جولة المساء إلى حيث تظاهر مئات الإسرائيليين.
Hundreds of Israelis demonstrated in central Tel Aviv against the increasing number of illegal African immigrants in the country and called for deporting them immediately. These protests came several days after the Interior Minister, Eli Yishai, called for arresting all African immigrants and deporting them from Israel. Israeli sources estimate there are 60,000 Africans in Israel from various countries.
ب60,000 من بلدان مختلفة.
مئات الإسرائيليين نزلوا إلى الشوارع تأييدا لدعوة وزير الداخلية.
Hundreds of Israelis took to the streets to support the call put forth by Interior Minister Eli Yishai to arrest and deport Africans living illegally in Israel. The scene was not free of aggression against Africans in local shops that employ them. The recent crimes and rapes committed by Africans instigated the Israelis to come out in protest. However, Yishai did not reveal the real reason behind his call from the podium of the Knesset.
We are not racists. We will solve the problem of refugees, but we also want to protect the Jewish majority. Otherwise, within a few years, we will find ourselves fighting another independence war.
In
every corner of Tel Aviv, groups of African immigrants will be found. According to official figures, 60,000 Africans are living in Israel. Half of them are from Eritrea, 15,000 from Sudan, and the rest are from other African countries. Brown-skinned people are viewed by Israelis as an uncivilized sight that should be removed.
Israelis are targeting us because we're black and we're Africans, not for other reasons.
We came here in search of freedom and democracy. Then when we came here, we encountered the same problems from the Israelis. But not all Israelis hate Africans.
Israeli organizations monitoring African affairs, especially those seeking political asylum, say that deporting them would risk their lives. And such behaviors is inappropriate for a people that suffered persecution from the Nazis.
Israel is a Jewish state established by refugees, for refugees. It cannot treat today's refugees this way.
The prosecution of Africans begins at the border with Egypt. Hundreds of them are arrested daily, while hundreds of others manage to arrive at Israeli cities. Along these borders, Israel is setting up a security fence that will soon cut off the way for immigrants from the African continent. Africans come to Israel in search of a new life and a safe refuge, but they are colliding with a society that hosts hatred and racism against strangers. This makes their life full of expulsion, arrests and deportation, as well as violence. Ilyas Karam, Al Jazeera, Tel Aviv.
Amnesty International warned in its new annual report that opportunities for change and democracy in the Arab countries that witnessed popular uprisings against their rulers may be wasted due to the continuing human rights violations in those countries. The human rights advocacy organization accused major powers of holding double standards and upholding their economic and political interests at the cost of human rights.
The uprisings in the Arab world dominated Amnesty International's annual report. In the chapters pertaining to human rights in the Arab Spring countries, the report concluded that toppling a few leaders is not enough to achieve sought-after change. Human rights violations were the major cause for the eruption of these popular revolutions. However, these violations, in different forms, continue extensively in some countries of the region. In Tunisia, human rights violations have not ended, according to the report. Security forces repeatedly used excessive force against protesters who demonstrated in protest of the delay of change.
لم يتوقف التعذيب بعد سقوط مبارك.
In Egypt, the practice of torture did not end after Mubarak's downfall. According to the report, the army adopted this practice. Military police have arrested thousands of civilians and brought them to military tribunals, which the international organization described as unjust. In Libya, even though the National Transitional Council vowed to build a democratic country, unpunished human rights violations and continuous rights infringements by armed militias remain an endemic phenomenon.
The new transitional governments in Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia have failed to meet the demands of the protesters, those people who took to the streets during the uprisings.
In addition, the report criticises what it refers to as the double standard of major powers in terms of supporting the people of the region. These countries intervened decisively against Gaddafi in Libya to protect civilians. However, they have not intervened militarily in other countries on account of their political and economic interests.
In dealing with the human rights situation in the Middle East and North Africa, the major powers practice a double standard. We saw that from Russia and from the West, such as the United States. For instance, the UN Security Council referred the situation in Libya to the International Criminal Court. But when it comes to Syria, it has not done that so far, even as the crimes against humanity continue.
In its new report, Amnesty International also expressed its deep concern for the crimes against humanity committed by army and security forces in Syria in order to quell anti-regime protests. The organisation requested a referral of the Syria case to the International Criminal Court in order to investigate these crimes. 50 years have passed since the establishment of Amnesty International, an organisation independent from all governments. Therefore, its annual reports have special significance and enjoy high credibility. Its latest report examines a critical phase in the history of the Arab world. The report is not only considered proof of the ordeal of those living under human rights violations, but also testimony that the path to change, especially in the Arab world, may be extremely long. But it has undoubtedly begun. From in front of the headquarters of Amnesty International in London, Ahmed Taha, BBC.
According to the Syrian Coordination Committee, 33 people were killed today by gunfire of al-Assad's brigades. Most of the victims were killed in heavy shelling that targeted the town of Ihsan in Idlib's Jabal al-Zawiya region and the city of al-Rastan in Homs province.
Syrians woke up to yet another day of indiscriminate artillery shelling targeting several cities. Homs neighborhoods endured heavy shelling, causing massive property damage to residents' homes amid a sharp food shortage due to the siege and vicious attacks launched by the regime's brigades on rebel areas. The local coordination committees announced that dozens of people were killed or injured by gunfire of al-Assad's forces. Among the dead were 4 victims who were killed in a shelling by the regime's army in the town of Ihsan in Idlib's Jabal al-Zawiya region. In addition, al-Assad's brigades resumed their indiscriminate shelling of residential neighborhoods in Deir ez-Zor's city of Muhsin. The brigades also initiated heavy shelling targeting the city of al-Harak in Daraa province, where dozens of soldiers have reportedly defected from the regime's army. In Damascus, a series of powerful explosions rocked the capital's neighborhoods amid heavy gunfire, especially in Al-Gaboun neighborhood. In the countryside of Damascus, the Free Syrian Army confirmed the defection of more than 200 soldiers, including 3 officers, in the area of Al-Qutaifa near Al-Kalamoun. In addition, al-Assad's Shabiha carried out a wide-scale arrest campaign in the area of Harasta. Dozens of university students were arrested in the raids. Meanwhile, UN observers continue to tour heated areas across Syria. Several observers visited the city of Aleppo, which has been witnessing heavy shelling over the past few days. On the other hand, the Syrian Al-Thawra Daily, which is loyal to the regime, accused the UN observer team and those behind them of seeking to implement secret agendas against the regime. In the countryside of Aleppo, the sound of random fire and heavy artillery shelling echoed across the area of Al-Tarib. Incoming reports also confirmed the arrest of one youth in the city of Tal Rifat. In Hama, the Syrian Revolution General Commission confirmed the murder of a mother and her 5 children. The commission added that the victims were slaughtered by members of al-Assad's Shabiha.
Al-Assad's gangs have slaughtered a mother and her 5 children.
The unified leadership of the Syrian Free Army issued a statement hailing the formation of a military council affiliated with the Free Army in As-Suwaida.
The formation of a military council in Al-Suwaida province is a step forward on the national path, similar to the one taken during the first Syrian revolution, which was led by Sultan Bashar al-Tarash.
In Daraa, the Syrian army and security forces stormed the city of Sheikh Maskin, backed by tanks and armored vehicles. The invading forces carried out wide-scale raids and arrests among the civilians. They also assaulted the residents, as well as vandalized and looted their homes. On the eve of a Friday dubbed Damascus We Are Coming Soon, thousands of Syrians took to the streets across various cities in massive demonstrations, demanding the downfall of the regime and al-Assad's departure. Amid these developments, new members of the Syrian People's Assembly were sworn in during the first parliamentary session. Mohammed Jihad al-Laham was elected as the Speaker of the Syrian Parliament with a majority of 225 out of 250 votes.
In the Turkish city of Istanbul, the Syrian National Council's Executive Bureau said in a statement that it has accepted the resignation of its president, Burhan Ghalioun. The council asked Ghalioun to remain in his position until a new president is elected at the General Assembly meeting scheduled for June 9th. Hours after his resignation, Ghalioun admitted that the council has failed the Syrian people who have sacrificed so much. He added that his resignation was due to internal division between the Islamists and the secularists.
Iran and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany are holding a new round of talks in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. The third round starts after bilateral talks between the head of the Iranian delegation, Saeed Jalili, and the lead negotiator for the P5+1, Catherine Ashton, as well as his Russian and Chinese counterparts. The talks will be focusing on the 2 packages of proposals the 2 sides exchanged on Wednesday. Sources close to the Iranian team speaking to Press TV painted a not very bright picture for the prospects of the talks. They've expressed doubt about the outcome of the talks if the P5+1 rejects Iran's package. Earlier reports said the P5+1 members are divided over how to respond to Tehran's proposals. The negotiations are aimed at resolving a standoff over a host of issues, including Tehran's nuclear energy program.
Baghdad talks have come at a time when Iran has announced it has mastered nuclear technology despite years of Western sanctions and pressure. The Western countries, led by the United States and under immense pressure from Israel, have constantly tried to portray Iran as a rogue country that cannot be trusted with nuclear technology. The irony is that those countries themselves possess nuclear weapons. The US has even used them against other nations, not only in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also in other countries like Iraq in the form of depleted uranium and in blatant violation of international law.
The United States has used nuclear weapons since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, especially depleted uranium, throughout Iraq, which is, of course, coating the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, the home of the mythical Garden of Eden, is shameful in and of itself.
In terms of Israel, I think they have to join the NPT. Unfortunately, they have been resisting that. It's very difficult to assume that a country that is not a member of NPT is questioning other people's rights under NPT.
In their latest summit in Chicago, NATO countries announced they will continue to keep their nuclear warheads. This goes against the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT. They've also turned a blind eye on Israel's nuclear arsenal, whose hundreds of nuclear weapons are the most imminent and serious threat to the stability of the Middle East and beyond. Iran has categorically rejected nuclear weapons as part of its defense strategy. The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, has issued a religious decree forbidding the production, stockpiling and use of nukes. During the first round of talks in Baghdad, Iran and the P5+1 traded two sets of proposals. Analysts say Tehran will insist on the recognition of its right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes.
What Iran has said from the start, I assume, is what the Iranians will continue to pursue. And that is equal rights, the same sort of rights that so-called developed countries, economically developed countries have.
Western sanctions against Tehran have been aimed at crippling the country's economy and making life harder for ordinary citizens. Iran's aviation industry, oil sector, trade and banking system have suffered from the embargoes, which according to many analysts are inhumane.
The United States, by trying to block trade, prevent Iran from importing and exporting, from shutting down the Iranian central bank and shutting down Iranian oil exports, are trying to make ordinary Iranians suffer.
All of this business, I am convinced, has a great deal more to do with Iran selling oil in multiple currencies and no longer supporting the dollar.
Many argue Iran will be the winner of the talks in Baghdad, whatever the outcome. The West's recognition of Tehran's rights, including the right to nuclear energy, will prove the futility of its efforts over the past decades, and the failure of negotiations, which could lead to further sanctions, will show the world the West's incompetence in resolving its issues with other countries through dialogue and mutual respect.
Today, Egyptians end the voting process in the first democratic presidential elections in their history. The results will not be announced until the last ballot box is counted. 13 candidates are competing in the elections, most notably Mohamed Morsi, the candidate for the Muslim Brotherhood, Abdelmonem Aboul Fatwa, a former member of the group, and Hamdin Sabahi.
Egyptians are continuing to cast their votes on the second and final day of the first presidential elections witnessed in the country after the revolution that toppled the eras of oppression and corruption. The judges supervising the polling stations broke the red wax seals off the ballot boxes to receive the votes of the people who insist on having a role in building their future. Cairo's neighborhoods witnessed a large turnout in the early hours that marked the beginning of the voting process. Women accompanied their children to this democratic celebration.
It is such a wonderful and successful experience. We are all happy that Egypt has reached this level of democracy. We will accept anyone who wins these elections, and we will support him as well.
The voters' lines extended in front of the polling stations. This became a repetitive sight that are characterizing the elections in Egypt after the revolution. Protesters expressed their hopes that this election will deliver a president who will fulfill the people's ambitions.
We
want a president who will feel that he is responsible for us. He should be God-fearing and protect the poor people. We reached a level where we need a prophet to lift us out of these miserable conditions we live in.
Although the elections witnessed a moderate turnout in other governorates due to high temperatures, the supervisors predict that the numbers will steadily increase as time goes by, especially since the government declared today an official holiday. As the election process advances, Deputy Chairman of the Freedom and Justice Party, Sam Al-Arian, assured that indicators confirm the lead of his party's candidate, Mohamed Morsi. This comes amid tight security procedures by security and military forces and the visible deployment of observers and monitors at polling stations. As soon as the election day ends, the subcommittees will immediately begin counting the votes. And if none of the 13 candidates obtains a majority, a runoff will be held on the 16th and 17th of June between the two candidates who obtain the most votes.
now in the studio to discuss the Egyptian elections is Israel's former ambassador to Cairo, Tzvi Mazel. Good evening, Ambassador Mazel. Thank you for coming in. Now, of course, today really was a historic day in Egypt. It really marks the ultimate end of the Mubarak era. We have 50 million people going to the polls. Now, the world media is hailing these elections as free. But would you really describe this process as democratic?
I think that probably it's free. It's the first time in the history of Egypt they have a few candidates for the presidency. You know, in the old time there was one Pharaoh, and in recent time it was one Mubarak. Now they have 13. So absolutely, it's from that point of view, it's free election. Now they are going to vote according to their wish, to their will. This is also, it means it's free. But the problem is the dilemma is different. They have a dilemma. What will be the preferred candidate for the president? An Islamist or a man from the former regime? Why did they do a revolution? I mean, what are the results of the revolution? Either the former regime man or an Islamist. It's a problem. It's a dilemma for the Egyptians. They don't have on the list of the candidates a man, a new man, young man with a new vision for Egypt. So this is a problem.
Well, obviously a clear winner will probably not emerge from this round of voting, and we're expecting to have a runoff on June 16th to the 17th with the final winner announced on June 21st. Any predictions on your part?
No, I prefer not to do it, absolutely. I listen to many people speaking about it and nobody can know, because we have now five candidates, the most popular. They are in the race and they will get most of the voices, most of the vote, you see. Now, who will win, we don't know, because if you look about the Islamists, there are three. So it means that the vote for the Islamists will divide it into three. And for the non-Islamic also, between 3 or 4 people. So there will be a second tour. And nobody can now, you can guess, but no one knows, absolutely no one knows.
In other regional news, Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah is appealing for calm today after protesters blocked roads and burned tires in Lebanon's capital of Beirut. The violent protests were launched by family members of 13 men who were reportedly abducted in Syria. The families say that their missing relatives were aboard a bus of Shiite pilgrims returning from a visit to Iran when their vehicle was stopped by the Free Syrian Army after it crossed the Turkish border into Syria. The Syrian rebels are now reportedly demanding the release of prisoners in Lebanese jails in exchange for the abducted men. After vowing to do everything in his power to secure the men's freedom, Nasrallah urged restraint and cautioned against sparking a conflict with Lebanon's army or security services. Here at home, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dodged a crisis with right-wing members of his coalition today by gaining a 2-week postponement on the first reading of a bill that would regulate private West Bank Arab lands. MK Zvulun Orlev of the Habayit HaYehudi party agreed to the postponement of his proposed legislation, which calls for the legalization of many unauthorized Jewish outposts in the West Bank settlements. The bill also calls for the financial compensation of Arab landowners when necessary and prohibits further demolition of any Jewish homes already constructed. In exchange for the delay, the Prime Minister ordered Defense Minister Ehud Barak to seize all preparation of the court-ordered dismantling of 5 buildings in the Al-Pana neighborhood of Beit El. National Union opposition MK Yaakov Katz also withdrew his version of the bill after the Prime Minister announced that he will stop any legislation by demanding coalition discipline.
In the Middle East region, which still witnesses fluctuating political and security mobilization, further undermining stability, security concerns are increasing, especially in those areas witnessing tension. According to knowledgeable sources, these developments require a serious, consensual evaluation among the countries of the region in order to help bridge the gap and solve all existing crises. Ibrahim Khalil Karbal reports.
The most tense area of the world, the Middle East, endured more than 10 wars in the last century, the most intense of them being the Arab-Israeli conflict, along with the disagreements and peace treaties that followed. This is in addition to the conflict of interest among the people of the same region, and the greed of the superpowers in other cases. In Syria and neighboring Lebanon, there are hopes for the situation to be resolved on one side and fears that the situation will continue to deteriorate on the other. Each of those countries plays an important regional, political, and economic role. Syria is the center of economic growth in the Levant region, linked by routes between Iraq, Turkey, and Jordan and the Mediterranean. However, indicators of commercial trade showed a large recession since the Syrian crisis began nearly a year ago. This was also seen during the tension that reached Lebanon and returned the feeling of insecurity, as well as the unannounced spread of arms, leading to tensions between the authorities and factions of the opposition. Meanwhile, tensions in the Kingdom of Bahrain have entered the second year. This explains the Gulf countries' rush to intervene, as the Gulf Cooperation Council views itself as the protester at the forefront of the eastern region. As for Yemen, it is no longer a happy Arab country after the political insecurity turmoil that Yemenis lived through over the past several months. It is difficult to expect calm in the foreseeable future in the region, and for as long as the Middle East remains an oil-rich region. It is also difficult to contain these ongoing issues across the Middle East, which may require serious reviewing in all of these unsolved and interrelated issues.
In Guinea-Bissau, after the new transitional government was formed, the military council announced today that its army will hand over the authority to civilians so the army can return to its bases. The new government, comprised of 27 ministers, will be assigned to organize general elections within a year.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.